again, were considered to be the work of the Connecticut River Valley Killer.
Of course, that's a lot.
We're going to first talk about 21-year-old Delbert Talman, who confessed to the murder of Heidi Martin. If you remember, she was the 16-year-old high school student who had gone out for a jog and was found behind Hartford Elementary School.
In Claremont.
Partially behind it was Hartford. Partially behind or partially in like a pond, like a river, little stream.
Yeah.
And she'd been raped, stabbed. Well, he later recants his confession and was acquitted of the murder. Now, her body was found in a spot near where Barbara Agnew would later be dumped. Now, Barbara Agnew was connected to the Connecticut River Valley Killer. Tallman resided in locations near the epicenter of the killings. In 1996, he was charged with sex offenses against a minor, serving time in prison, and being required to register as a sex offender in Florida. Some list Heidi as a victim of the Connecticut River Valley Killer. Others don't because of Delbert's confession. But there's no physical evidence tying Delbert to her murder or any of the others.
Wow.
Then we're going to talk about a guy named Gary Westover. In 1997, he's a 47-year-old, and he's also a paraplegic. This is a deathbed confession. He tells his uncle, who happened to be a Grafton County deputy, that he needed to confide something in him. He needed to clear his conscience. Westover claimed that he, along with 3 friends, went on a ride one night and had this chance encounter with Barbara Agnew. The 4 abducted, raped, and murdered the woman, then dumped her body in Vermont. His uncle shared the information with authorities, but they didn't seem too interested in this tale. Westover's aunt reached out to Anne Agnew, the sister of Barbara, in 2006 and told her, what had been conveyed in this deathbed confession, and sent that information on to detectives. But again, nothing ever came of it.
That's strange. You got this man who's, I'm going to assume he wasn't a paraplegic all his life.
No, he was in a wheelchair at the time of the murders.
Really?
Yeah. He claims that he went joyriding with these 3 buddies. They loaded him up in his handicap van.
Took off.
Murdered this chick, dumped her body.
Happened to come across her, took her, and murdered her.
Yes.
Okay, so if he had nothing to do with it, he's dying, at the end of his life. What's his, it's not a jailhouse confession. It's not, my cellmate told me this. Will you give me, stuff off my sentence? What's his motivation? Though it does happen, there's not a lot of motivation there to, as you're passing, just throw it out there that you killed this woman that you had nothing to do with, right? I mean, that's weird.
It is odd.
But it does happen.
But
for different reasons.
Lots of strange things happen in this world.
It's true.
That I can't wrap my head around or explain.
Well, that's true.
Now, one of the internet's favorite suspects for the murders is a man named Michael Nicholou. But I want to call him Nicholou because it looks French to me, but everybody else calls him Nicholou, so we'll call him Nicholou. In 2001, a private investigator named Lynn Marie Carty was hired to find a woman named Michelle Marie Ashley. She was from Vermont, and she'd been missing since 1988, along with her 2 children. Michelle's mother believed her daughter to be in the company of her common-law husband, a man named Michael Nicholou. Now, Michael was a decorated Vietnam War veteran, helicopter pilot. He was discharged after an alleged attack on civilians in the Mekong Delta, where he was said to have taken a knife and told others he was going hunting for humans.
Wow.
He was known for his hand-to-hand combat attacks.
Jeez.
The military had brought up murder charges, and they were dropped. He was released, but later treated by the VA for PTSD. At one point, he owned a sex shop in Virginia, which was raided twice by police for selling obscene materials.
But it's a sex shop.
Well, that's why I thought I would mention it, because I don't understand that. If it's an adult sex shop, what do you think they're going to be selling in there?
Well, they could be being old, fuddy-duds about it, or it could be venturing off into extreme porn or child
Yeah,
porn.
but this seemed like that he was just selling,
right,
skin flicks and nudie mags.
Yeah. Okay, so maybe they were just being fuddy-duddy?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, while he was in Virginia, he met Michelle and ended up moving with her to New England, where she was from. The pair had 2 children, a boy named Nick, a daughter named Joy. Her family said he was quiet, and they thought he was just kind of peculiar. I mean, hey, the guy's a combat vet. He's probably going to be a little quiet and peculiar.
Did I just invent something? Extreme porn. It's in your face.
Yeah.
Do get done by the do. What?
Okay.
I'm going to sponsor the X Games next year with that shit.
Their marriage was troubled. He had violent spells. Michelle eventually told her family she was leaving him in 1988 because she feared for her life. Then, poof, she went missing.
Wow.
Yeah. 2001, this private investigator named Lynn Marie Carty tracked him down. He was living in Georgia. Now, he initially denied knowing anything about his missing family. He finally says that Michelle was a slut who was using drugs and just up and vanished.
Okay.
But, coming to find out, he had his children.
He had the kids.
Nick, the son, was confirmed to be alive and was, living with his dad and a new stepmom named Eileen, and had been living with them for some years.
What about the other kids?
Yeah. So dad has the kids.
So, okay. So, yeah, that's really weird.
Here's the kicker. By 2005, Eileen had left Michael, moving to Florida to hide in her sister's house. She was afraid of him. Wearing a black suit and carrying a guitar case filled with guns, Michael busts up into the house, shoots his wife Eileen, her 20-year-old daughter, and then turned the gun on himself.
Oh my God.
Carty researched Michael's background and made connections to the Connecticut River Valley Killer. Michael's first wife had been a nurse, a profession shared by 3 of the victims. Michelle's daughter was born in the hospital where Barbara Agnew worked. Michael also owned a Jeep Wagoneer in the 1980s during the time of the attack on Jane Borowski.
Okay.
Now, here's what I'm telling you about this guy, Nicolou. No DNA or evidence ties him to this case at all. 350 people were narrowed down to have owned Jeeps in the area of the time of the Borowski attack.
Right.
That fit the description.
I'd say it was pretty common type of vehicle in that type of area and during that time period.
He was also living in Virginia when the earliest murders occurred, the Courtemanche, Freed, and the Morse killings. And though Nicolou was a deeply troubled man, I don't figure him for the murders at all. I mean, I think he was a man who maybe had an obsession with his wives, was abusive, but I don't peg him for a serial killer.
No, I think you can, even from the murder-suicide, there might be control issues in the relationship. Like, that's ultimate control. I'm going to kill you and then kill my damn self, not even have to answer for it. Maybe controlling, obvious PTSD issues. Given the story from being in Vietnam, murder charges, possibly killing civilians, and on top of that, being a decorated helicopter pilot, that's when the first time we really used helicopters in that manner. So you had to have damn nerves of steel. There's no telling what he went through. But yeah, it doesn't really fit this whole other type.
Well,
for
like
this lone
I
hunter.
said, he is a popular suspect on the internet.
Well, there's a few little crumbs but yeah, I don't see it.
And some of these folks who believe he is the Connecticut River Valley Killer also think he could be responsible for the Colonial Parkway murders in Virginia, but I don't believe that either.
Okay.
Now, another killer in the area was Terry Rasmussen, who was responsible for the Bear Brooks murders near Allentown. You've heard of those?
Maybe.
Well, he was in California during the time of the other murders, but, it's been a theory that perhaps he, was more active in New England. There's also Edward Maynard, a murderer who was serving time in prison for the 1994 killing of a Rhode Island woman named Patricia Poquette. He died in 2011, But in 2014, his DNA was used to tie him to the murder of a woman named Kathleen Denault, and he was also the prime suspect in the death of Judith Whitley back in 1987. And he was a strangler, which some of our earlier victims, some of the first victims,
were strangled as well.
Yeah.
And there was many victims, more than one, they couldn't, get the cause of death.
Craig Conkey is another convicted murderer responsible for at least 3 women's deaths. He killed Teresa Reed of Plymouth in 1991. He strangled and bludgeoned her after breaking into her apartment, much like those women in, what was that, Portsmouth?
Yeah, that was Laura and Tammy Little.
Yeah.
Both killed in their homes.
The 1992 murder of Kathleen Dempsey, whom he stabbed repeatedly after breaking into her home, and also the 1994 murder of Mary Lou Sales. He also broke into her home and strangled her.
Yeah, and there was also Sylvia Gray, the elderly woman, who was killed very near her home.
A Cornell student who was studying economics named Michael Bruce Ross was a convicted serial killer who was executed in 2005 in Connecticut. Ross killed 8 girls and women between 1981 and 1985 in Connecticut and New York. He raped 7 out of his 8 victims. He spent 18 years on death row. Now, in several cases, he forced his victims into a wooded area where he raped them, then strangled them.
Right.
Now, he's actually pretty interesting. We may have to put together a whole episode on that guy. Vermont native and fundamentalist Christian Gary Lee Schaefer was sentenced in 1984 for the kidnappings and murders of 3 girls, a 13-year-old, Sherry Natasha, Teresa Fenton in 1981, and an attack on Dana Buxton, who was from Brattleboro in Vermont, plus the murder of Catherine Richards in 1983. So he sexually assaulted and murdered teenage girls.
My God, there's a lot of damn killing up through there.
Now, it is, of course, speculation that these murders might all be tied to the Connecticut River Valley Killer. Only about 7, as I mentioned before, are believed to be his handiwork by investigators. But in my opinion, there are more cases that could be tied. I mean, okay, he could be changing his MO, because if you think about initially, he's killing very young girls, he's strangling them, bludgeoning them. Maybe he's just trying to figure out what works for him.
He could be starting out and then evolving.
Fledgling.
Yeah.
Right. And not everyone acts in the same way every time. I mean,
true.
Ted Bundy killed in a variety of ways.
Well, he did. And yeah, sometimes they're trying to find what their damn kink is, what really turns them on about it.
I mean, it is possible that by the late 80s, he had developed a taste for the knife. But, I mean, come on. Many killers change up their MO. But really, my theory is this is the work of 2 serial killers. One was a knife attacker, and the other raped, then bludgeoned or strangled his victims. I mean, you got those women who were victimized in their apartments. You've still got these women who are being dumped off, off the highway and in wooded areas. So my theory is at least one of these killers was maybe a truck driver.
Okay.
I'd say he resided in the area of Claremont, New Hampshire. He knew that area really well. Like maybe he grew up there. That was his home base, right?
Or at some point lived there long enough to learn the local ins and outs.
And he knew the knowledge of the woods. And you got to think, this is like his safe place.
He's comfortable there.
Yeah.
So he could be some kind of an outdoorsman or something like that.
Right. And that's what I'm thinking.
Hunter.
He probably grew up being out in these woods, so he knows them, the ins and outs.
See, those logging road type of things are very popular with hunters. You can get through some of the more remote areas and then back off right into the woods. So there could be that element.
I feel like this guy probably had a family. He was able to hide in plain sight.
Okay.
Like BTK or like
so he's able
Ridgeway.
To play normal.
Mm-hmm. And he knew all the major highways in the area, and he was able to travel with ease all around New England.
And it could explain being away from the family. Well, I'm driving, I'm delivering, Okay.
This is just Heather's theory.
Right.
Now, profilers have tried to put together a view snapshot, if you will, of the killer. They believe he's probably a good-looking, confident man who feels comfortable in the area. The knife is a way for him to penetrate the woman without sexually assaulting them.
Okay.
Now, the violence associated with the knife and the brutality of the slaying suggest